Hi, Amy. How are you?
Oh, hi. I'm good, thanks.
I'm so excited to talk to you today. And big thanks to your team for reaching out to us and making this happen. I will admit that what you and your organization are doing was completely new to me. Like I didn't even know such a thing existed. So I'm very excited to learn something new about your organization and of course about you as well. So this is great for me. I don't know how it is for you, but it's great for me.
Well, no, I'm thrilled to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Amy, this opportunity for us to get with women entrepreneurs is really important to us and really important to the platform. So again, thank you for coming on and telling your story, not only about yourself but also about Good Loop. And I'm really excited to get into all of that. But maybe just by way of background, would you mind, in your own words, just telling us a little bit about you, Amy, and then maybe a little brief overview of Good Loop, but we'll definitely get into a lot more of both during the course of this conversation.
Okay, so I have spent my whole career in Adland.
Mhm.
I always wanted to work in advertising. I always really loved the combination of difficult, complex business problems, but
Mm.
often quite creative solutions.
Sounds
It's
like an
sort of a
entrepreneur to me.
perfect, yeah, it's like the perfect mix for an awkward artsy kid like me. And I studied psychology at college
Mhm.
with the clear intent of sort of understanding how people make decisions and how to
Right.
manipulate them.
Right.
And then I used that degree to get a job at Ogilvy, which is a big advertising agency. And I spent a couple of years there making very glamorous TV ads for fabric conditioner in Vietnam. And I
Oh,
loved
wow.
it. I loved it a lot. Like the glamour
Super
aside,
glamorous. Yeah.
it wasn't quite Mad Men, but it taught me so much. It was so much fun. I mean, it was a real baptism of fire, and it really taught me about how to think about building a brand,
Mm.
how to think about an audience and a consumer, and the key things that trigger a purchase decision.
Sure.
It was an incredible foundation, but I think it also showed me some of the shortcomings of our industry and some of the ways that our industry is not living up to its potential and
Sure.
not harnessing its value its value and its influence in a way that it could.
Sure.
So that was sort of the birth of Good Loop, really, was sort
Mm.
of taking all the stuff I'd learned from working in the advertising industry and trying to harness it in a way that made advertising an industry I felt really proud to be a part of.
Mm. I appreciate the mission sort of Good Loop and sort of the ethical media platform space that you folks are in. And I'll ask you to say a little bit more about Good Loop, but before that, Amy, you fast forwarded a little bit there where you said you know, you were working in the ad space and then you kind of went to start Good Loop as a way to manifest sort of the best things that you wanted to see in an ethical media platform. But that's a big decision to decide
Mm.
to launch your own platform, to go out on your own. Any specific variables, I'm sure there were, that sort of played into that decision?
Mhm.
It's a brave thing to do, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing to say is that, it didn't feel brave at the time.
Really?
A lot of people said that to me. A lot of,
Mm.
when I quit my job, a lot of people use that word.
Yeah.
But I guess it's partly it's partly privilege.
Mm.
I'm very privileged to have an incredible family behind me and
Yes.
backing
Sure.
that, like, if I've got a safety net, so it didn't feel that scary. And I'm also very lucky to have I guess have started this business at an age where I had very little to lose.
Mm.
I started Good Loop when I was 25.
Okay.
And I remember at the time thinking very clearly, like, what's the worst case scenario where this has been
Sure.
worth it, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
when you take that leap and you quit your job and suddenly you had this incredible career path and now you're pulling pints in a pub and working on a business plan at the weekends, like,
Right.
yeah, objectively, it looks like you've made a terrible decision.
Right.
And there's definitely a very finite window of time where it is just a bad decision, where,
Mm.
like, it doesn't work, you've lost your career, you've wasted a year pulling pints, and you're worse off. You've made less money. Like, for every reason, it's the
Right.
worst
But you can
decision.
recover from all of that.
all of that is recoverable,
Yeah.
but none of it is positive. So
Right.
so in my head, I was like, what's the first milestone at which this was a good decision? Like, worst case scenario, it doesn't work, it fails, I make a tit of myself, all of that happens. But
Right.
let's say I learned a new skill, then it would be worth it.
Right.
Or let's say I built a relationship with a really valuable investor that next time might invest. Or, you
Right.
know, so in my mind, I really started to create these like milestones, which was
Mhm.
like, well, even if it fails, it was still worth it for
Sure.
that.
Sure.
And that was a really helpful way to sort of eat an
Right.
elephant in chunks.
25 is young to start as an entrepreneur. And I do get what you're saying around the idea of like, you have maybe less to lose at 25.
Yeah.
There is a lot of individuals now in that, 20 to 25-year-old category that are putting themselves out there as entrepreneurs. And I do think it's one thing to say, like, put yourself out on social media as an entrepreneur, because that can be sort of a very general, you're smiling, yeah, a very general sort of way to categorize yourself. But it's another thing to kind of like establish an organization, especially one that is specifically trying to address some hard challenges that you folks were seeing in online advertising. In your mind, Amy, what if I'm a 22-year-old woman listening to this and I'm thinking about what entrepreneurship looks like, what in your mind is the major difference there? Is it just the commitment, or what do you think the difference is?
You mean the difference between being an entrepreneur and just saying that you
Saying
are
I'm
on
an
social
entrepreneur.
media?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I think there's no difference at all, because every entrepreneur is a hustler and is cheeky and knows how to play the story, right? Like, that's
Right,
the point. When
right.
I first started, I've got this amazing story of like exactly that kind of mentality. So when
Oh,
I
cool.
first started, I I found this conference. It was called AdTech London, and there was a speaker at this conference who only invested in ad tech, in media
Mm,
technology businesses.
mm,
And she ran a small fund. It was like a fund that she kind of curated all these amazing
sure.
angels from that had industry experience, and then she invested in a select number of businesses. And so she was a keynote speaker. So I thought, great, I'll go to this conference. And the conference ticket was like $500,
Wow.
$700. I think it was expensive.
Pounds or dollars?
But
Because that's a big difference.
well, increasingly it isn't a big difference, depressingly for me. But yes, it was a lot of money, and it was, you know, just as we've
Sure.
discussed, quit my really good job.
Yeah.
So I had no money. So and this is where I think that hustly, cheeky spirit of just put it on your LinkedIn and then you'll figure it out
And you'll
comes
figure it
in.
out. Yeah. Yeah.
So I messaged the organizer of the event and I said, so I'm a social media expert, which I'm not,
Yeah, but
and
wait, but you know what? Be the, get the, yeah, wear the clothes that you want, right? What's that expression? Dress for the
100%.
job you want. Dress for the job you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I dressed as a social media expert and I said, look, I'll do the social media for your ad tech event for
Right.
free. For
Right.
free. You're welcome, for free. But in exchange, I want to interview all your keynote speakers. And they were like, oh my God, amazing. A social media expert wants to do our social, like they were so game.
Right.
And it meant that I got to sit down with Rose Lewis, the leader of this fund, and for an hour interview her, you know, under the auspices of social media management. And then right at the end, I said, look, we've got 5 minutes left. Can I quickly just pitch you my idea?
Nice.
And lo and behold, about 6 months later, she was my first investor.
So wow. All right. I got to unpack this, Amy, because there's a lot here. So, when I was at a women in VC conference a few months ago, and the whole concept was around like getting more women into venture capital, not
I love that.
yeah, it was more around finding women jobs in venture capital. But
Okay.
there was a lot of conversation obviously about how venture capital is under investing in women enterprises, right? But one of the common threads I heard from many of the speakers there was give to get, give to get, give to get, give to get. So it sounds like you did a good give to get there,
That's
and
nice. Yeah, yeah.
really smart, right? Like you were like, hey, I need that 5 minutes, right? I'm going to do all this for you, but you got to give me those 5 minutes, and you got to be steadfast in getting your 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
That's
I
cool.
like that. I like how much that what you've said makes it sound like I had a strategy.
Well, next time you tell the story, you can say my strategy all along
Yeah,
was a give
yeah.
to get. And are there
Thanks.
is there a disproportionate I don't know much about the ad tech space, so please educate me, Amy. Is there a disproportionate amount of female leadership in the ad tech space?
No,
No. So that's
no.
so that's good. I mean that's so many women entrepreneurs that we speak to, women are such the minority in their women in leadership roles are a huge minority in their space, but you don't
There are
experience that so much
some.
in the ad tech space.
Oh, I massively do. There
Yeah.
are some really, really strong and inspiring women in ad
Mm,
tech.
mm,
Integral Ad Science is a
mm,
company that audits about 35% of all ads on the internet, and that's run by a phenomenal female CEO called
mm,
Lisa. So, and there are a handful of incredible examples and women who have been really, really supportive to me
mm.
through various networks as well. But I would say we are by far the minority.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm sure, again, probably from an investment standpoint too, any female founded, female led ad tech organizations probably aren't getting the funding that they need in some cases, I would assume. Although you did say
Yeah,
you did find an investor early on, but sounds like that was a very specific situation for you.
yeah, we've been very fortunate in our raising cycles.
Mm,
We've had a few really good rounds of funding, and we have a really supportive investor base. Um, I would say it's ad tech is really like any other technology. You
right.
should think of it more on the tech, think of the tech as the big word in ad tech.
Yeah.
It's really much more on the technology spectrum. So we probably sit in parallel to all other tech
Mhm.
spaces. Advertising, like the world I come from, the world of creative and agencies, that's
Sure.
much more sort of open and inclusive to women. So
That's good.
that's kind of
Yeah.
an interesting dynamic. But
Yeah.
but certainly, yeah, I think for us in the ad tech world,
Mm.
it's just like any other tech company.
Mm. So speaking of your tech company, Good Loop, can you delve in a little bit? And thank you for all that background, Amy, on yourself and on your the beginnings of your entrepreneurial journey. But can you delve a little bit for me into that what I think is a win-win strategy that Good Loop is creating where, viewers get to feel good about the time and the brands that they're associated with and all the charitable cause donations and talk to us a little bit about that strategy.
Hmm. So I'll start by outlining some of the potential in
Mm,
advertising, some of
right.
the untapped potential. And I'd say there's two really inspiring start points. The first is we collectively in digital advertising spend $700 billion a year buying and selling eyeballs online. We are
Unbelievable.
one of the
Yeah.
biggest consumers in the world. And as a
Mhm.
sector, as an industry, that spend could be put to such good use.
Mm,
So I think that's the first really exciting and important thing to remember is the volume and scale and size of our spend. And that leads me on to sort of the second point, which is that spend not only can be used in really good ways, like you mentioned the charities, I'll speak to that more in a moment, but
sure.
it also funds the free internet. Every
Mm,
time we buy an ad on
sure.
the Washington Post, we're funding that journalist, we're
Right.
funding that journalism. And the reverse can be true. We can fund
Right.
hate speech and climate change denial and fake news and all of the things that make our society worse.
Right.
So those are two things I think about a lot. How much money we spend and how much responsibility that spend has in keeping
It's
our
associated to it. Sure.
internet free.
Yeah.
So Good Loop, basically, we work with big global brands and we help them do good through their media spend. So every dollar that they spend buying advertising online, we help them do good in three ways. One, they could fund a charity. So
Mhm.
if you choose to not press that tempting skip button and watch an ad from Nature Valley, you
Right.
can unlock a donation to support nature conservancy projects across the US. And
Beautiful.
in partnership with them, we've planted over 600,000 trees in national parks in the States.
Outstanding.
Super cool stuff. And for them, it builds brand love, confirms to the consumer their commitment to those environmental issues, and gets you not to skip, so they get better performance from the ad.
I love skipping those ads, so I'm with you. I'm with you so far.
Exactly. Gives you a good reason to sit on your hands for 15 seconds.
Yep.
So that's product one.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing we do is we help brands fund all of that good stuff I talked about. We help them find quality journalism. We help them find and fund news journalism. We help them find and fund Black-owned or minority-owned publishers. We help them make sure that their media spend goes to really, really good values-aligned publishers.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing we do is we help them understand the carbon footprint of all of that advertising.
Oh, wow.
Because frankly, the amount of electricity used to pump ads around the internet is probably second only to
it has to be
blockchain.
astronomical. Yeah.
Astronomical is a good word for it. Yeah. Because every time you land on the Washington Post, there are trillions of mini tiny immediate auctions happening for your eyeballs in the milliseconds before that page loads.
Sure.
Hundreds and thousands of brands might have bid on your eyeballs. One brand will win and all the others will lose, but all of them use servers,
right?
The warehouses full of servers to run those bids.
Yeah. Tons of cloud computing just churning away like velociraptors.
Yes. So we help brands basically understand that footprint and reduce it.
And you've got, I mean, household name brands that are part of what Coca-Cola, Unilever, H&M. Talk to me a little bit about, how you attracted and maintained those partnerships. Is it just more of the same of what you've just described, or were those organizations, do they have a higher degree of corporate responsibility or social responsibility? And I guess, do you think very specifically about the types of clients that you want? Are you in the business of changing people's minds? Are you in the, I'm super curious about that, Amy.
Okay. So yeah, we've worked with about 80% of the world's top 100 brands. And the reason is that every brand is expected to take this stuff seriously today. It's not really an excuse to say you don't have a sustainability plan, you don't have a path to net zero. It's not really possible to be a big global business and say you don't take action on diversity and equity. And often these brands really struggle with translating intention into action. And what we're doing in all three of those products is putting their literal money where their mouth is. You say you care about it on some fancy corporate page, well, why don't you fund it? Why don't you actually fund it? So first and foremost, I think that's why we've got good traction, is like we're helping them take action in really easy, really illustratable ways.
Right.
In terms of the brands we work with, this is a very interesting and thorny question. On the one hand, there are very, very dangerous effects of greenwashing. And I would never want to be a business that encourages or propagates misleading or falsely optimistic content. If you see a piece of greenwashing from a brand, best case scenario, it tricks you into buying that brand and perhaps it isn't sustainable. Worst case scenario, it might actually put you off caring because it's so full of lies and complexity and a lack of trust. It erodes the trust in the movement. Like it's so
now you don't want to be
dangerous.
Involved in anything associated with that. And
then you just say, well, fuck it, I won't bother. And that's the worst case scenario for everyone involved. So we are very, very, very strict about greenwashing and all of the other equivalent washings in terms of brands saying something that isn't the case. We work very closely with the ASA who regulate and define those terms. We actually called out, we had a client who wanted to work with us, who will remain nameless, and they wanted to work with us, and we went through an ethical review process with them, so which we do with all our clients. They failed our process and we said, sorry, here's why. And 6 weeks later, they were called out by the ASA for greenwashing. So sometimes we get it right, and I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. I appreciate that because, again, that kind of goes back to the root of my question, which was, how selective are you in thinking about the brands that you want to work with? And it absolutely seems that Goodloop has a way to think about sustainability and convey a message of sustainability effectively, especially in a market where there's a lot of misconception, right?
Yes. So I am really proud of that. What I will also say though is, on the other side of the spectrum, you know, we're an advertising company, and
Right.
so pretending like we're saving the world
Right.
is
Yeah.
greenwashing on our
It's a
part,
little
because
disingenuous. Yeah.
we're still helping Coca-Cola sell Cokes.
Right.
So we have to find a middle ground where we're working with brands to tell an authentic story about their action, but we're not helping brands misrepresent or over-exaggerate their work.
Right.
And so that's where that ethical review process is really important, and that's something I'm like constantly trying to improve internally at Goodloop. And so I have an example of a client you mentioned, actually, H&M.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think it fits nicely in this grey area in between those two extremes of like greenwashing on one side and consumption and consumerism on the other. The client in question is H&M.
Mm-hmm.
So H&M came to us. We've worked with them for many years, and said that, you know, they wanted to do this campaign, and it was all around their conscious collection. So H&M have a very specific collection where all of the cotton is sustainably sourced, all of the factories are based in the country that the garment is sold. It's like an end-to-end supply chain management, very, very, very good. It doesn't excuse the 90% of their clothes that massively contribute
this
to
is
landfill
10% of their enormous clothing line, right? Yeah.
So I guess our theory of change here is we could just say no, because like you say, 90% is terrible for the planet. Or we could say we'll only work with you on your conscious collection, and we will work to prove the ROI of that campaign. So then up the flagpole, you can send the results that said your conscious collection actually drove more visits in store, more clicks, more engagement, because your consumers care about this. And perhaps it moves from 10% of your collection to 12.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Not from 10 to 30, but 10 to 12, right? Yeah. And
so I think
that's a huge win.
I think that's my real answer, is like, we're never going to be perfect. We are an advertising company, but I think our mission is help brands do good and then articulate the ROI of doing good, so they do more of it.
Wow. I am my mind is racing through like brands that I have bought because of their sustainability claims, right? But then what the realization is hitting me right now is what you just said about how it's probably like 1% of their business or 10% of their business, right? And so that's an interesting revelation on my part. So thank you for that. I'd love to I would love to change the narrative a little bit right now. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about leadership. I did a lot of reading about you before we had this chat. And you know, you talked in one interview that you gave, you talked about yourself as a natural optimist. I would have to assume that being in the business that you're in, you have to be somewhat optimistic for the good in people. But I'm curious as to how your optimism kind of influences or is reflected in your style as a leader, Amy, and any reflections you have on kind of balancing your passion along with your need to actually run a business.
I love that question. I think that there are a couple of different kinds of leader that I've encountered in my career, and some lead by saying, right, I'll go ahead, this is the plan, you guys follow me. And there are others who lead from behind and are sort of the engine and the motivator that sort of set a direction, but broadly they're pushing rather than pulling. I guess is how I sort of think about it. And I think probably the optimism is the thing that decides which of those you are. Like, an optimist is definitely in my case anyway, the optimism manifests in a belief in the team, in a belief in the people I've hired. I feel like I sometimes overestimate or overextend my team because I have such a belief in the people I've brought along with me.
You're like, I believe you're all heroes and you all can do this, but at the same time, I may be overcommitting you.
A little bit, yeah. And I think that's something like anyone that works closely with me would probably say is fair. So I guess that's maybe a way that the optimism comes through, is that sort of pushing from behind and giving people a lot of space in front of themselves. Like, I never want to be a micromanager. In fact, I'm quite a terrible manager because I'm so not interested in the day to day. Like I've told you the direction.
Right. Go do
Either
it.
you get there
Yeah.
or you tell me you're not. Like
Right.
go do it. Right, exactly. So I think that's sort of how I've worked more closely with my team. And then overall at the business level, like my leadership style is the flag waver. You know, I think I'm very much the energy engine a lot of the time. I'm the one saying, this is why this matters. This is why we care. And this is why I care. And this is what we could achieve. Like, imagine how exciting it would be. And when we first started, it was, imagine raising £1 million for charity.
Right.
Now we've raised over 8 million and we're going, imagine when we hit 10.
10, 15.
Imagine when we, so it's just always creating that sense of like, why are we here? Why does it matter? Because we can all work anywhere. So why are we here?
And is that, and again, every leader wants to believe that that resonates with those who they are leading, but do you see that resonate in the folks that are working alongside of you every day?
Do you know what I actually really enjoy is trying to understand like the definition of our mission in different people's heads. Because I kind of assume that will resonate with everyone. And then I'll realize that, you know, our head of engineering is actually here because they've never worked in ad tech before and they really wanted to
want
understand
that experience.
Like, because I mean, those little auctions we mentioned before, that is such a complex ecosystem that, as we say, funds the free internet that no one knows about. No one knows those bids are happening. And so understanding that is actually a really interesting perk of the job. So there's loads of different whys that people have. And I see it as my job to really know everyone's why and acknowledge that it's not the same as mine.
I actually don't think I've heard a leader such as yourself ever articulate before that they want to understand truly their people's whys. So that to me is, that's interesting. I don't know, maybe I'm being naive in that, but maybe I need to think about my own leadership style and understand. I always want to understand my client's whys, right? And understanding the why of my client and how to solve a complex problem for them, but really getting into understanding the whys of your people. Why are they there? I like that. I like that approach a lot. That's really cool.
It's fun. It's a really interesting little experiment to play when you're sat creepily staring at everyone in the office.
I've certainly done the exercise where you ask people to sort of give back the narrative of your mission from their perspective, and you will learn, to your point, tremendous things when you do that, right?
And I like that.
So that's fun. Amy, when you think a little bit about, I wish I knew then what I know now, to the 20-year-old female entrepreneur in training, in residence, in aspiration, who's listening to this, any specific pearls come to mind for you there? That's a long pause.
Well, I had like a million ideas. I'm trying to decide which one's the most useful. I think I wish I've become a lot more resolute in the belief that a decision is better than the wrong decision.
Good. I like that.
And
I like that.
That's something when I look back and I think about like key mistakes and missteps, that's probably the one that I would most benefit from knowing earlier. I mean, there's a million. That's why the pause was so long. There's so much I've learned and so much I've got wrong. But that's one that's like, it's such a nice, useful mantra. It's such an empowering mantra because it gives you permission to make the wrong decision and know that you still did the right thing. Because doubt, uncertainty, a lack of clarity, a lack of direction, those things kill momentum.
And paralyze you.
100% paralyzes you.
So I like that. A decision is better than no decision, or a decision is better than the wrong decision, but make a decision, right? And delve forward into something. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's very sound advice. Talk to me a little bit. You mentioned before having a very supportive environment, I guess, that you came from. Talk to me a little bit about your village, about your posse. Like, what makes it so supportive to you?
I have throughout this whole process had an incredible partner,
Mm,
and I heard this like beautiful articulation of love once, which is you're climbing different mountains, but you have the same base camp.
mhm.
And I think that's so lovely because there's nothing more suffocating than think that you're climbing the same mountain and
Right,
you're tied to each other.
right.
But in that interim period where I quit my job and before I'd started Good Loop, I went to Chile in South America, and I spent
Mhm.
3 months living on the coast in Chile,
Oh, wow.
learning coding and a few other things. And it was so isolating and lonely and scary. And honestly, I didn't speak a word of Spanish, and
Mm.
I ignorantly thought,
They'll
it'll
speak
be
English, yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't fine. They didn't understand a word I was saying. And I was so close to quitting. And I often think back to that time and think if I hadn't had my partner as such an anchor,
Yeah.
as such a reassuring person, I could constantly be like, this is hard, I'm alone, I'm doing the wrong thing, I'm doubting myself, and like and have someone there to just go, I hear you, that's a really normal reaction,
Yep.
but why don't you just keep going a little bit longer? I just think I would have quit a million times over by now.
Yeah, that's good. It's so important to have a partner, a family, a posse. One of my former guests refer to it as a posse. So that's like that's the term I use all the time now because
Love
I
that.
just love that term. And by the way, she was an 85-year-old woman who referred to it as a posse. So I was like, that's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, that's
Um,
badass.
so it's so badass. Yeah. Amy, what's next? What are the upcoming initiatives for Amy?
So the third element of our business I mentioned, the measuring and understanding carbon,
Mm,
we have scratched the surface of that, but we're
mm,
seeing so much appetite from big businesses wanting to understand that. In the EU, from 2025, it will be mandatory for all major corporations to publicly um, publish
mm.
their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions across their entire
Oh, that's
company,
great.
which is awesome. And that,
Yeah.
that will be a legal requirement January 1st, 2025.
I don't think
And
we
so
have a
what,
similar requirement here in the States.
not yet,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the state of California
Mm,
has proposed it.
okay.
And so it's going through the state legislature at the moment. So California, a bit like with GDPR, and then California was the first to take up on terms of privacy.
Hmm.
I think a similar thing is happening. The EU is leading, and then California is bringing it to the States. Either way, most big US businesses will have a subsidiary in Europe, and any business with over 50,000 employees in Europe will have to comply. So it affects the US anyway. And basically, if you've got to publish it January 1st, 25, that's 24 data. That's 2024 data,
Sure,
which
makes
means you
sense.
need to be measuring it now.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's next. That's what's next for us. Is like there's this huge deadline, huge opportunity. Every big global business needs to do it, and they don't have a clue how. So we're really growing that side of the business. We're saying we know
Let me show
how,
you
we can
how.
help.
Yeah, we can help. Absolutely.
And
Fantastic.
the US is our focus. We're scaling and growing in the US massively at the moment. I moved to New York in January last year, and I've just started growing our team there. So I'm really excited about that.
I did see that in researching you as well that you had relocated to the States. That's exciting. Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
am an
How are you finding
American.
stateside life?
Oh my God, like the holiday season in America is exhausting. It's
Yes.
non like from
Yeah.
Labor Day, then it's
Nonstop.
Halloween,
Yeah.
then it
Then it's Thanksgiving. Then it's
then it's
Christmas. Then it's New
Thanksgiving, then
Year.
it's
Yeah.
Hanukkah, then Christmas, and oh my goodness. In the UK, it's just Christmas. We just got one.
Right.
I was exhausted.
You need to take a break now in January,
Yeah.
but in January is when you have to ramp everything up for the year, so there is no break, right? Amy, thank you for taking a little bit of a windy journey with us today from the inception of you as an entrepreneur, the inception of Good Loop as an organization, your leadership style and insights, and all the work that you're doing to address the current challenges in our sustainability business landscape. Thank you for that. thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us. And we would love to stay in touch, and we would love to continue to see Good Loop grow and expand.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we'll speak again soon.